Hello and welcome back. It's Professor Rankin again. This is the lecture on Chapter 16, which involves advertising, public relations, and sales promotion. So let's get started. Just to frame the talk a little bit, I wanted to bring back the reminder of the differences between business to business and business to consumer markets. First of all, just the idea of what the customers are like. Of course, you and I are sitting in individual consumer markets when we go to various retailers and buy things like toothpaste and milk. There's many of us. We're spread out all around the country, and the major takeaway or setup for this chapter is that the promotional method when you talk about consumer markets is heavily emphasized or focused on advertising. In Chapter 17, we'll talk about personal selling, where that ends up driving the promotion in B2B market. So just to get an overview of all the different tools we have in our set of things we could be doing as far as promotion goes, certainly there's advertising. The objective for advertising is broadly to inform, persuade, or remind. You can have organizational advertising about the goodwill of the company versus product or service advertising. At a high level, when you think about advertising, you should realize that it offers strong control but mixed credibility. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And this is compared to public relations, which, in the third bullet there, I'll jump to that. It provides stronger credibility as a third-party expert has something to say about you that's reviewed your product. But at the same time, it's much more difficult to control than advertising. Within public relations, there's two types. There's sort of broad awareness publicity, or there's there's also marketing PR, which is more like product or service advertising. It's PR for a particular offering. Now, there's two kinds of different sales promotions. There's consumer sales promotions, and those are things that are aimed at the end customer, target market, things like coupons, rebates, etc. But there's what goes on behind the scenes is there's actually trade promotions, which are promotions coming from the manufacturers of toothpaste, like I said, and diapers and green beans. And these promotions are actually aimed at the channel partners, people like retailers or distributors. They tend to be financial offers. They tend to be limited time offers. It gives those channel partners margins, and it provides an incentive for them to sort of push the products, as we'll see in the next slide. Of course, social media can support, depending on the business, most, if not all, of the above in various ways. This is the idea of pull versus push campaigns, and this comes up much more in B2C marketing because it has a distribution channel. Pull campaigns are the ones we see coming from consumer packaged goods companies. They're aimed at us. There's advertising, there's public relations, and there's particularly the specific consumer sales promotions, which are coupons, ads with deals, rebates. The pull campaign is intended to create awareness, interest, or preference with customers, end user customers, who then want to run into the stores and they basically pull demand through the channels. That's why it's called a pull campaign. Push campaigns are aimed at the channel members, which are definitely trade promotions, limited time financial deals, but also you can have advertising and PR in the, say, the wholesale distribution channel, and they're intended to excite channel partner members to push the products through the channels. Okay, that's what I just said there. It does things like get you better shelf locations, perhaps end cap displays, and sometimes the retailers may push on part of the discount to consumers. So what's it look like? Here's a diagram with an example of Procter & Gamble, Target, and Kroger. Of course, Procter & Gamble is the manufacturer. And when they develop a new version of toothpaste or diapers or whatever it is, they might elect to run what we'll see is probably both, but they'll run as the pull campaign, and that'll aim at us with coupons, rebates, things like that. At the same time, unbeknownst to us, they're probably making some sort of a deal with the channel to get them excited about pushing the product. Here's a simple example. A little while ago, I was shopping for snow tires, and I'm a little bit of a car guy, so I do like Tire Rack. Plus, here in Steubenville, there's sort of a limited selection of options for, say, snow tires. So I've bought from Tire Rack before, so I went back there, starting to have a look around, and I found that they have the sort of current but past model Bridgestone Blizzak. Great brand name. I've had them in the past, maybe 7 years ago, on a different car on closeout, because they're also, Bridgestone also has a new offering called the WS90. It gets about the same rating on snow, but is newer, so maybe there's a few things that are a little bit better about it. For me, I'm not sure if it's worth $140 in my mind as I'm looking at these things. But then I also notice Continental, which is a German tire company, European tire company. Good company. I've had some experience with Continentals in the past, good tires, and they have a brand new snow tire out. No ratings yet. And if you add them up, it's $560, but they're offering a special offer: buy a set of 4 and get a $70 Visa prepaid card, which is pretty much like cash. You can go in and use that wherever you need to buy your groceries. So that puts the total price around $490. So yeah, okay, so I'm thinking about these a little bit. Good experience with Continental. No ratings on these snow tires. Not sure. Well, I went with the least expensive, trusted Bridgestone Blizzak WS80s. But I definitely thought about the Contis. And I thought longer about those more expensive Bridgestones. And as a result of having this offer, I poked around a little longer, and I actually scratched my head about the most expensive Michelin X Ice tires. But in the end, I went with the least expensive. I might not have poked around quite as long if it wasn't for this offer. So you can definitely understand what the benefit was. I would have not looked at these brand new offering from Continental if they hadn't had an offer that put it in the price range of past model Blizzaks. And for Tire Rack, I think it's a benefit because it had me linger on the site a little bit longer and scratch my head about the Michelins, which, if I was in a different position and not quite as sensitive on price, I probably would have went for. Advertising. This is just a slide to basically introduce something we all know. It's a popular form of promotion, especially for consumer packaged goods and services. The basic ideas are to inform consumers, persuade them, and sometimes remind them, because part of advertising for pretty basic things like cereal or bread is just to remind you that you're out of them. I'm not going to play this video here, but if you want to have a look at a video, it's the link's on Blackboard, and I'm going to come back and refer to this in a couple places. So it's an okay ad. You see that they're actually doing ads on YouTube, so we can find them there too. They're probably the same ads that you find on TV. It has a theme for all you love, and it actually uses a social love appeal plus a rugged wilderness appeal, which has an impact of a healthy appeal as well, with the sort of standard out in the world today, one dog plus one kid kind of imagery. Now, when we get around to thinking about how we're going to invest or plan our advertising, this is an important concept. So broadly speaking, advertising helps create and maintain brand awareness. And if you have good products and the competitive situation isn't too tough, it can help you increase market share. The point of this slide, though, is new brands that, of course, have smaller market shares. They need to spend relatively more on advertising than large organizations. There's two reasons behind that. One is what I'll talk about at length in a moment, is this advertising response function. I'll just leave it at that. And the other idea, before I go into the first point, is that on a relative basis, bigger firms can actually afford to send more ad advertising because they're just a larger firm. So if a large company spends $2 million on advertising and they have revenues of $200 million, that's a much smaller percentage as the same company spending $2 million if they have, say, $100 million in revenues. It's twice as much percentage-wise. So what is this S-shaped response function curve? So to start, across the bottom, there's advertising expenses increasing. So it splits it into three ranges because it's an S-shaped curve. And on the vertical axis is additional or incremental sales. And what they generally find with advertising is that if you spend a little bit up to a certain point, it still doesn't have much impact. But then above a certain point, it starts to gain traction. Here's the rationale for that. As if you take Business 315 Integrated Marketing Communications, you'll read about this idea that we probably don't remember an ad until we see it at least 3 times. And we really remember when we see it 5 times. Then there's actually something that if we see it 10 times, it actually might sort of wear out, okay? And that's why advertisers switch up the ads. They make them shorter after they've been using them for a while, those sorts of things. And what this says basically is that if you don't spend enough, you just don't get that frequency. But if you spend just the right amount, you start to really gain traction, and which means basically you've got to get into range B with your spending. Okay, so little spending, little effect, middle investment, high effect. And then what happens also is after a while, you start to get diminishing returns. So it's in advertising, it's trying to find this sweet spot of where you need to invest. And in particular, new brands need to spend more. First of all, because they're new, but also because of this fund. Institutional advertising, it's basically just the advertising related to enhance a company's image. Advocacy advertising, you've seen more of this in the past 5 or 7 years where companies take a viewpoint on particular controversial issues. Well, in that case, as a member of Franciscan University, I think there's certain issues that actually do have true, good, or beautiful responses. So I actually have a view on certain things there. I think in the utilitarian world out there, a company like Nike probably simply sees it as, okay, let's take a viewpoint. How can we make more money? And they probably choose to take a viewpoint on a certain subject because they do a lot of research and add up the plus and minuses and things like that. I like companies like Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A that actually take stands for moral issues. But I think if you just step back and look at it from a business perspective, it's probably something that may or may not have a positive impact on, say, revenues or profits. But you should do the right thing. Product advertising. So this has to do with product advertising. Of course, that means some sort of advertising that's talking about the benefits of a good or a service. Fine. Pioneering advertising, a definition from the text. The idea of when there's a new product category, say hybrid cars 15 years ago, Toyota and Honda had to really spend a fair bit of money explaining what the heck is a hybrid so that we become comfortable with it. So that's an example of pioneering advertising. Competitive advertising, this is when you're really trying to position your product as better than other brands. It's usually used in the growth phase of a innovation, if you will. Finally, comparative advertising. Well, this compares 2 or more specifically named or shown brands on 1 or more specific attributes. So this usually comes up in slower growth markets. One thing about this comparative advertising I'll say is that you rarely, I don't think ever, see comparative advertising used by the leader in a category. So you won't see comparative ads for a Toyota Camry comparing it to, let's say, a Ford Fusion, if that's the right comparison even. But you will see Hyundai ads comparing their model versus, say, a Toyota, and trying to position it as better, or at least get you into the get you to consider that versus the Camry, because the Camry is probably already on your mind if you're in the vicinity for that sort of a car. Now, this comparative advertising is okay in the US and it's okay in some other countries, but it's not so in other countries. For example, Germany doesn't allow comparative advertising. Creative decisions. Well, I mean, an ad should not sit in isolation. It should be sort of part of a campaign that includes product information on the web, product brochures perhaps, and a whole range of, and timed out over 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, where it's a whole series of advertising having a common theme, slogan, and a set of appeals. There's different objectives, very specific communication tasks that a campaign should accomplish. At the beginning, it's going to be trying to build awareness, especially if it's a new category product. And later on, it may have a more specific objective, like bringing you to the web, filling out an information web request form, or even perhaps an ad that has a coupon, a rebate in it, taking you to a very specific site of the web so you can get a hold of that rebate. Different objectives for different activities in the communications. When we get around to doing advertising, we definitely want to talk about the benefits of the product, not its attributes. An attribute is simply a feature of the product. For example, whether or not, let's say a Core i3 Intel chip. Okay, well, that's actually the name of the product, but let's say here's a specific feature. It has a 3.1 gigahertz clock speed, which can burst to 3.9 gigahertz. Do we really care about that? No, what we care about is that the product is going to be responsive and fast and not slow all the time underneath our fingers. So benefits can actually vary by segments. Okay, the same product going to 2 different segments, you might highlight a different benefit for one segment versus another. So you really have to think about your audience. Here's a really simple example. Of course, the past couple of years, you've seen a lot of these solid state hard drives showing up in computers. There's a couple pictures of one. The old-fashioned hard disk drive actually has a disk in it that spins, and the spinning takes power, and it takes a little while for it to spin up. But the chips on the right that are inside the solid state drive, well, 10 years ago they were too expensive to do something like that with, and now they've become more reasonable, I'll say. So we really don't care about whether it has a spinning disk or solid state chips in it, do we? Probably not. We probably really care about whether or not it starts up faster and has a longer battery life. The spinning takes some power, and it's also slower when you start it up. Okay. The solid state's also thinner and probably a little lighter. But on the downside, it's generally more expensive, especially when you think about storage per dollars, or if you're thinking about the total price of a laptop, say. So, you'd want to emphasize starts faster, longer battery life, maybe thinner. I think the first checkbox is the thing that they mostly push. And they don't really talk about what the chips are doing versus what the spinning disk used to do, which is correct. An advertising appeal, well, this is sort of a theme for an ad. It's aimed to capture attention and make some impression, generally positive, but maybe it's a challenging impression. So sometimes to catch your attention, it's pointing out a difficult social problem or something like that. In the Subaru advertisement that I mentioned earlier, it starts off showing a family outdoors, one kid, one dog being outdoors. So maybe that has a healthy spin to it. And frankly, they're taking too much stuff out of their car. But they have a lot of stuff, and it's showing, I guess, the storage capacity of the Subaru Forester. Eventually, the dog walks down through their outdoors, and they actually line up sort of things that they got over time, and it actually sort of traces their history as a family. So visually, it shows the dog sort of walking back through time, and it ends up with a tagline, Subaru for your journey, and then it mentions that I'm pretty sure it says something like the longest running small SUV or something like that. So the ad is, these are the themes. The themes are outdoors, family, dog, healthy, getting away from the house, and maybe a partner for your journey in life. So it's definitely aimed at the family, and that's what the appeals are. Exhibit 16.1 from the text lists some of the different appeals you might have. Certainly financial has to do with cognitive, whether or not you're going to save money by using this. Health, popular appeal these days. Fear is an interesting one. If you take the integrated marketing communications course, you'll hear that fear is something that up to a certain level, it actually gets your attention. When it gets too scary, we tend to just say, turn it off. I'm not going to watch this. So there's a balance using fear as an appeal. Different sorts of other appeals, you kind of get the idea that these are some reasons why marketing gets a bad name for itself. Not up there. Humor is oftentimes an appeal that people use. And Maslow's needs hierarchy are often the basis for appeals, things like safety, social love, etc. Okay. Media schedule, when you get around to actually planning a campaign, you're going to think about how you're going to run, say, the ads, whether they're print ads or TV ads, things like that. Okay, so for this short discussion, I'll talk about TV ads. Not TV ads, print ads. So here we go. So one way to do it is continuous. Magazine comes out once a year, 12 months a year. You decide to go with one page in every month of the publication. An alternate would be to say, okay, you know what, we're going to run 2 pages for 2 months, and then we're going to sit out 2 months. Same investment. And that would have to do whether or not you think that would have more impact than running every month, say for the same investment. It might, because people would see you twice in the magazine, or maybe 3 times in the magazine for a shorter period. Depends on the target audience. A combination of that is to run sort of a baseline. We're going to be in every month, but then for April, May, and June, we're going to go for 2 ads, 2 pages in the magazine. And then coming back in September, we're going to up it to 2 pages in the magazine for September, October, November. That would be a pulsing schedule. Seasonal is pretty much like flighted. It's just that for particularly seasonal products, it'll be tighter on with their best seasonal selling timeframes. Public relations, okay, this is the other strong 1-2 punch you have with advertising. It engages editors, it engages the public, it takes a viewpoint on issues, and those issues can be sort of less controversial versus more controversial. The popular Dove ads probably about 8 years ago, they engaged this topic of whether or not runway models are beautiful versus real people beautiful. So that's an important topic to engage, and there's what I think a better versus a worse outcome on that. So it's working with, and it's also specifically working with editors at magazines that review products. Okay, so there's sort of a broad organizational kind of a PR that builds the goodwill towards the company. We call that publicity. And then what I call marketing PR or focused efforts to get third-party reviews and endorsements. So that would be like a product review on a car magazine, or maybe the editor review of a laptop on CNET's website. You get the idea. Here's an example of marketing PR. It's just a screen capture off of the Car and Driver website. Let's take a look at it. It's for that same 2019 Subaru Forester. Okay, let's see. It gets a 4 out of 5 rating. It's an editor's choice. I can see that some guy named Chris Doan has reviewed this, and it starts talking about highs. Let's see. Good at most everything that matters to crossover buyers. That sounds utilitarian, pretty good. Spacious cabin, relaxed ride, and handling. So you really can't control PR. So PR will come out, and the Redditor is going to give you some lows, whether it's even the top car is going to have some lows. But for the Forester, you get lethargic acceleration, uninspired design, and few luxuries come standard. So overall, it says, in its quest for automotive domination, Subaru engineered all the fun out of this Forester. Well, about 10 years ago, we had a Forester, and darn it, it was really like a good Swiss Army knife. Good utility, not utilitarianism, none of that, but utility, solid utility. Was it a little boring? Yeah. Was it reliable? Yes. Was it inexpensive to have maintenance done on it? Yes. So, depending on the segment, some people are going to say, well, we're fine with tepid acceleration as long as it's a solid performer and overall lifetime costs are low. So, this shows you really that it's much more credible because it has sort of plus and minuses in it from Chris there. But the risk is they're going to possibly say some moderately negative to maybe even pretty negative. I mean, for certain segments, going out to buy some sort of a small SUV, they're going to say lethargic acceleration. Well, me, for one, would probably say, what's going on with that? But then again, I don't think about acceleration in an SUV, small SUV. So, I mean, engineered all the fun out of it? Well, okay, maybe not. I don't think it makes a big difference. Really, you drive the car, and for certain segments, that's going to be the right car. And that's going to help that ad. Okay, so to wrap things up here, we saw that, this is a wide range of tactics to build preference, awareness, credibility for both the products and the companies, and then to incent purchases. This is what Chapter 16 is all about. These are the tools: advertising, PR, consumer sales promotions, trade promotions, and then there's a separate talk about social media. The strength of advertising is going to be the control. You're going to be able to say what you need to say, and you're going to be able to time it exactly as you want, for example, on that pulsing media schedule. But it's less credible than PR. At a high level, PR's main strength is credibility. There's a third-party reviewer there, and that's more believable. But you have to risk a little bit about the credibility with the editor. Less control. Sales promotion, incentives for short-term sales. You remember the offer got me to think about those new Continental tires for a moment. And then you have this whole idea of pull and push campaigns. Pull are sales promotion aimed at you and I. Push involve channel partners, is going to be a short-term incentive aimed at retailers and wholesalers. So that's the big picture of Chapter 16. Hope you found it interesting, and we'll catch up with you online real soon.